Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. I'm Isabella.
And I'm Patrick. We're so excited to have you here today because we're kicking off something new and exciting, a brand new grammar series.
That's right. Grammar can feel intimidating sometimes, but in this series, we'll break it all down into simple, fun, and useful lessons. Whether you're just starting to learn English or looking to brush up on your skills, we've got something for everyone.
And what better way to begin than with the very foundation of grammar, parts of speech.
Parts of speech are the building blocks of sentences. They help us understand how words function in a sentence and how they work together to create meaning. It's like learning the rules of the game before you start playing.
Exactly. Once you understand parts of speech, you'll find it much easier to form sentences, improve your writing, and even enhance your speaking skills.
In this episode, we'll cover what the parts of speech are, dive into a few of them in detail, and share practical examples and tips you can use right away.
We've also got a fun little activity later on to test your skills, so make sure you stick around for that.
Before we dive in, just a quick reminder to like this episode, subscribe to our channel, and share it with anyone you know who's learning English. Let's help everyone master grammar together.
All right, let's get started with the first episode of our grammar series, Parts of Speech. So Isabella, let's start with the basics. What exactly are parts of speech?
Great question, Patrick. Parts of speech are the building blocks of English grammar. Every word you use falls into one of these categories, and they all work together to form sentences. There are 8 main parts of speech: nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections.
Wow, 8! That's a lot to cover, but it sounds like understanding these can really help learners.
Absolutely. When you know the parts of speech, it's like having a user manual for English. You'll not only build better sentences, but also learn faster and more efficiently.
All right, let's dive into each one. Starting with nouns. I know they're words for people, places, or things, but are there different types of nouns?
Great question. Yes, there are. We have common nouns like cat or city, and proper nouns which are specific names like Patrick or London. There are also abstract nouns which are ideas or feelings like happiness or freedom, and collective nouns like team or flock, which refer to groups.
So nouns are pretty versatile. What about pronouns?
Pronouns are super handy. They replace nouns to avoid repetition. For instance, instead of saying Patrick loves Patrick's podcast, we can say Patrick loves his podcast. Easy, right? There are different types of pronouns too, like personal pronouns, he, she, possessive pronouns, his, her, and even reflexive pronouns like myself.
I see, and verbs, they seem like the action heroes of sentences.
Exactly. Verbs show action or a state of being. For example, in she runs, runs is the action. But verbs can also show a state, like is in Patrick is a host. There are also auxiliary verbs like will or have that help form tenses, and modal verbs like can or should that express possibility or necessity.
Interesting. And adjectives come next, right?
Yes, adjectives describe or modify nouns. They answer questions like which one, what kind, or how many. For instance, a beautiful sunset, 3 apples, or the tallest building. They help make sentences more vivid and specific.
Can we try something fun here? How about a quick exercise? Listeners, grab a pen or just think of a noun. Let's describe it with adjectives.
Great idea. Let's take the noun car. We could describe it as a fast, shiny red car. See how adjectives add detail and paint a picture in your mind?
Totally. Now moving on to adverbs. These always seem a bit tricky. So they're like adjectives for actions. Got it. Next up, prepositions. These always trip me up.
Adverbs modify verbs, adjectives, or other adverbs. They often answer questions like how, when, or where. For example, she sings beautifully, or he arrived late. A fun tip, many adverbs end in "ly," but not all, like fast or well. You're not alone, Patrick. Prepositions are small but mighty. They show relationships between a noun or pronoun and another word. For example, in the book is on the table, on shows the relationship between the book and the table. Common ones include in, at, by, with, and about.
So Isabella, why do learners really need to know all this? Can't they just speak without worrying about these details?
Good point, Patrick. While it's true you can communicate without knowing grammar terms, understanding parts of speech gives you a deeper mastery of the language. It helps you build better sentences, expand your vocabulary, and avoid common mistakes. It's like learning to cook with a recipe. You'll get much better results.
I love that analogy. Listeners, stick with us as we take a deeper dive into the essential parts of speech, nouns and verbs. We'll unpack why they're the backbone of English and how you can use them confidently. Let's dive right into our first part of speech, nouns. Nouns are the building blocks of sentences. They're the words we use to name things, whether it's a person, a place, an object, or even an idea.
Exactly, Patrick. A noun can be something tangible, like a car or a tree, or something abstract, like happiness or freedom. Without nouns, we wouldn't even know what we're talking about.
Let me break it down a bit further. Nouns come in several categories. Proper nouns. These name specific people or places and are always capitalized. For example, London, Maria, Monday. Common nouns. These refer to general items like book, dog, or city. Concrete nouns. These are things you can see or touch, like apple, chair, or water. Abstract nouns. These are things you can't physically touch, like love, knowledge, or bravery.
And let's not forget about countable and uncountable nouns. Countable nouns like apple or car can be counted. You can say 1 apple, 2 apples. But uncountable nouns like water or advice can't be counted. You wouldn't say 2 waters, but you might say 2 bottles of water.
Right, and nouns don't just stand on their own. They can take different forms to fit into sentences. For example, singular, the dog is barking. Plural, the dogs are barking. Possessive, the dog's toy is on the floor.
Nouns are also the subject of many idioms and expressions. For example, a blessing in disguise. Here, blessing is a noun referring to something good that might not seem that way at first. A dime a dozen. This idiom uses the noun dime to talk about something common or inexpensive.
Great examples, Isabella. Now let's give our listeners some practice. Here's a sentence. The girl found happiness in the park. Can you spot the nouns? That's right, they're girl, happiness, and park. Easy, right?
Totally. And remember, nouns are everywhere. Pay attention to them in your daily conversations or when reading, and soon you'll master this essential part of speech.
All right, that wraps up our first part of speech, nouns. But don't go anywhere. We've got 7 more to explore. Up next, verbs, the action heroes of language.
Now that we've covered nouns, it's time to jump into the action. Literally. Let's talk about the second part of speech. Verbs. Verbs are the heartbeat of any sentence. They show us action or a state of being.
Exactly, Isabella. Verbs can be as dynamic as run, jump, and dance, or as subtle as is, seem, and become. Without verbs, a sentence just wouldn't make sense.
Let's break them down further. Verbs generally fall into 2 main categories. Action verbs. These describe physical or mental actions. For example, she writes stories. He thinks deeply. Linking verbs. These connect the subject to additional information about it. Examples include is, seem, and become. The sky is blue. He seems tired.
Another important aspect is tense. Verbs tell us when an action takes place, past, present, or future. For instance, past, she walked to the store. Present, she walks to the store. Future, she will walk to the store.
And let's not forget about helping verbs. These little guys like can, have, or will work with main verbs to create more complex meanings. For example, she can swim. He has eaten lunch.
Verbs also take different forms depending on the subject. For example, I run every morning. He runs every morning. Notice how the verb changes when the subject changes? That's called subject-verb agreement.
Now, Patrick, let's spice things up with some idioms involving verbs. For example, hit the road. This means to leave or start a journey. Throw in the towel. This means to give up or quit.
Great examples, Isabella. And to help our listeners practice, here's a sentence. They are reading a book about history. Can you spot the verbs? That's right, are and reading. The helping verb are works with the main verb reading.
Here's another tip. If you're struggling with verb forms or tenses, try listening to native speakers or using grammar apps. Verbs can be tricky, but with practice, they'll become second nature.
All right, we've powered through verbs. Remember, verbs bring sentences to life, so don't shy away from exploring different tenses and uses.
Up next, we'll tackle the third part of speech, adjectives, the words that add color and detail to your sentences. Stay tuned. All right, it's time to sprinkle some flavor into our sentences. Let's talk about the third part of speech, adjectives. Adjectives are the words that describe or modify nouns and pronouns, adding detail and color to our sentences.
Exactly, Isabella. Adjectives answer questions like what kind, which one, and how many. They help paint a clearer picture. For instance, a beautiful sunset, 3 curious cats, the red car.
Adjectives can also express degrees of comparison. Let's break this down. Positive degree describes one noun without any comparison. She is tall. Comparative degree compares 2 nouns, often adder or using more. She is taller than her brother. Superlative degree compares 3 or more nouns using east or most. She is the tallest in her class.
That's such a fun way to add context. And there are also coordinate adjectives, where multiple adjectives describe the same noun. For example, the bright, sunny day. Notice how you can place a comma between bright and sunny because they're equally describing the noun.
Patrick, here's a question for our listeners. Can adjectives come after nouns? The answer is yes. While adjectives usually come before the noun they describe, they can also appear after a linking verb. For example, the flowers are beautiful. Here, beautiful describes the noun flowers, but it follows the verb are.
Adjectives can even turn simple sentences into expressive ones. Compare these. The dog barked. The small, energetic dog barked loudly. See how much more vivid that second sentence is?
Absolutely. Now, adjectives are also crucial when using idiomatic expressions. For example, a piece of cake, meaning something very easy. A close call, meaning a narrow escape from danger. Adjectives are what make these phrases pop.
Let's practice. Here's a sentence. The cheerful child played with a fluffy yellow ball. Can you identify the adjectives? Yes, cheerful, fluffy, and yellow. Each one adds a layer of meaning.
And if you want to expand your adjective vocabulary, try keeping a journal. Write a sentence every day describing something in detail. For example, the crisp autumn leaves danced in the cool breeze. Adjectives like crisp and cool make it so vivid.
Adjectives might seem small, but they have a big impact. They can make your English not only correct, but also captivating.
Now it's time to move on to our fourth part of speech, adverbs. If adjectives add color to nouns, adverbs do the same for verbs, adjectives, and even other adverbs. Don't miss it. Now that we've talked about adjectives, let's shine the spotlight on their versatile cousin, adverbs. Adverbs are like the spice rack of language. They enhance verbs, adjectives, and even other adverbs by adding more detail and context.
Exactly, Isabella. Adverbs often answer questions like how, when, where, and to what extent. For instance, how, she sings beautifully. When, they arrived yesterday. Where, he looked everywhere. To what extent, I am completely satisfied.
Adverbs are incredibly flexible. They can describe actions, he ran quickly, or they can modify adjectives, she's incredibly talented, and they can even intensify other adverbs, he ran very quickly.
Many adverbs end in "ly," like slowly, happily, or eagerly. But don't let that fool you. Some adverbs don't follow this pattern, like fast, well, and hard. For example, she runs fast. He did well on his exam. They work hard every day.
Adverbs also help set the tone and pace of a story. Imagine these sentences. She walked cautiously. The second sentence gives us a whole new perspective, right? Adverbs bring depth to our storytelling.
Here's another tip. Be careful not to overuse adverbs. Instead of saying she ran very quickly, you can say she sprinted. Strong verbs often eliminate the need for adverbs, making your writing more concise.
Good point, Patrick. Now, let's look at some common positions of adverbs in sentences. Adverbs can appear. At the beginning, quickly, she finished her work. In the middle, she quickly finished her work. At the end, she finished her work quickly. The position often depends on what you want to emphasize.
And let's not forget about adverbs of frequency, like always, often, sometimes, and never. These tell us how often something happens. For example, I always drink coffee in the morning. He never forgets his keys.
Patrick, why don't we give our listeners a quick quiz? Which sentence uses the adverb correctly? She sings amazing. She sings amazingly. The answer? It's the second one. Amazingly is the correct adverb form.
Here's another one. Adverbs are key in comparisons too. For example, she works harder than her colleague. He speaks more fluently than before.
Adverbs are truly powerful. They can elevate your English from basic to expressive. My tip for our listeners? Watch movies or read books and pay attention to how adverbs are used. Write them down and try to use them in your own sentences.
Great advice, Isabella. And with that, we've covered 4 parts of speech. Next up, we'll dive into the 5th, pronouns, the words that keep us from sounding repetitive. Let's keep going.
Let's talk about pronouns. These are the words that help us avoid sounding repetitive and make sentences flow smoothly. Instead of repeating a noun over and over, we use pronouns to stand in for them.
Exactly, Isabella. For example, instead of saying, Maria loves Maria's dog because Maria thinks Maria's dog is adorable, we can say, Maria loves her dog because she thinks it's adorable. Much smoother, right?
Absolutely. Pronouns come in many types, each with its own job. Let's break them down. Personal pronouns. These refer to people or things directly, like I, you, he, she, it, we, they. For example, she is studying. They are playing soccer. Possessive pronouns. These show ownership, like mine, yours, his, hers, ours, theirs. For instance, this book is mine. Is that car yours? Reflexive pronouns. These reflect the subject back to itself, like myself, yourself, himself, herself, itself, ourselves, yourselves, themselves. For example, I taught myself to cook. They did it themselves.
There are also demonstrative pronouns like this, that, these, and those. They point to specific things. For example, this is my favorite song. Those are delicious cookies. And we can't forget relative pronouns, which connect clauses like who, whom, whose, which, and that. For instance, she's the one who won the race. This is the book that I mentioned.
Patrick, what about interrogative pronouns? These are used for asking questions like who, whom, whose, which, and what. For example, who is at the door? What is your favorite color?
Great point. And then we have indefinite pronouns, which refer to non-specific things or people like someone, anyone, everyone, no one, something, and nothing. For instance, someone left their jacket behind. Is there anything I can do?
Pronouns really do a lot of heavy lifting in our sentences. They also make our conversations more natural. Imagine how awkward it would be to repeat someone's name constantly.
Totally. Here's a fun exercise for our listeners. Try rewriting this sentence using pronouns. John and Sarah went to the store because John and Sarah needed groceries. The answer? John and Sarah went to the store because they needed groceries. See how much simpler that sounds?
Patrick, do you notice that pronouns also help us in storytelling? They make it easier to focus on the story rather than the words themselves.
Exactly. And one last tip, be mindful of using the right pronoun to match the noun it replaces. For example, Maria loves her cat. Here, her refers to Maria. The dog wagged its tail. Here, it refers to the dog. Mixing up pronouns can confuse your listener, so clarity is key.
With pronouns mastered, you're one step closer to sounding fluent and natural in English. Up next, we'll tackle the sixth part of speech, prepositions. Those tiny but mighty words that help us describe relationships. Ready, Patrick?
Ready as ever. Let's keep the momentum going.
Now it's time to dive into prepositions. These small but mighty words are essential in English because they show relationships between other words in a sentence. Without them, we'd have a hard time expressing location, direction, time, and even cause.
That's right, Isabella. Prepositions are like bridges connecting nouns or pronouns to other parts of the sentence. For example, in the book is on the table. The preposition on tells us where the book is in relation to the table.
Exactly. Let's explore the three main types of prepositions. Prepositions of place and location. These answer where something is. Common examples are in, on, under, next to, and between. The keys are in the drawer. She sat between her friends. Prepositions of time. These help explain when something happens. Examples include at, on, and in. We'll meet at 3 p.m. He was born in July. Prepositions of direction and movement. These show movement or direction. Examples are to, into, onto, through, and toward. She walked to the park. The bird flew through the window.
Prepositions can sometimes be tricky because they don't always translate directly from other languages. For instance, English speakers say good at something, not good in something. It's just how the language works.
Exactly, Patrick. And some phrases have fixed prepositions. These are called collocations. For example, interested in, not interested of. I'm interested in learning more. Afraid of, not afraid from. He's afraid of spiders. It's important to learn these as a package.
Listeners, here's a quick exercise for you. Fill in the blanks with the correct preposition. He arrived or the airport late. The cat jumped the table. The answers? Add and onto. Easy, right?
Absolutely. Prepositions also appear in common expressions, like out of the blue, meaning unexpectedly. The idea came out of the blue. Under pressure, meaning stressed. He works well under pressure.
One last note. Prepositions are often paired with verbs and phrasal verbs, which can change the meaning of the verb entirely. For example, give up means to quit. Run into means to meet by chance. We could dedicate an entire episode to phrasal verbs.
That's a great idea for the future, Patrick. For now, let's remember that prepositions may be small, but they have a big impact on how we express ourselves. Coming up next, we'll move to the seventh part of speech, conjunctions. Ready to connect the dots, Patrick?
Let's do it. Prepositions are in the bag. Onward to conjunctions.
All right, everyone. Now let's connect things together with conjunctions. These little words are like the glue that holds our sentences together, linking words, phrases, or clauses to make our thoughts flow smoothly.
Exactly, Isabella. Without conjunctions, our sentences would feel choppy and disconnected. There are three main types of conjunctions, each with its own role. Let's break them down.
First up, we have coordinating conjunctions. These are used to join words, phrases, or independent clauses of equal importance. The most common ones can be remembered with the acronym FANBOYS, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Here are some examples. I want coffee, but I don't have any milk. Do you want tea or juice?
A quick tip here. Coordinating conjunctions are often used with a comma when connecting two independent clauses. For example, he loves hiking, and he goes every weekend. Next, we have subordinating conjunctions. These connect a dependent clause to an independent one, showing the relationship between them. Examples include because, she stayed home because it was raining. Although he was tired, he kept working. Since it's late, we should head home. If you study hard, you'll pass the exam.
The dependent clause relies on the main clause to make sense. For example, because it was raining doesn't work as a full sentence. You need the main clause, she stayed home, to complete the thought.
That's a great point. Subordinating conjunctions help us explain cause and effect, contrast, or conditions. They're essential for creating complex sentences.
Finally, we have correlative conjunctions. These work in pairs to connect equal sentence elements. Examples include either, you can either take the bus or walk. Neither, nor, she likes neither coffee nor tea. Both and. He is both smart and hardworking. Not only but also, she is not only talented but also kind.
These pairs add emphasis and balance to your sentences. They're super handy when you want to highlight choices or contrasts.
Let's test your knowledge. Try filling in the blanks with the correct conjunctions. I wanted to go to the park. Score, it started raining. She is go, kind, intelligent. We can stay home, we can go out.
The answers? But, both, and or. How did you do?
Before we wrap up, let's touch on a common mistake. Many people overuse conjunctions like and or but, creating run-on sentences. For example, I went to the store and I bought milk and I came home. Instead, try, I went to the store, bought milk, and came home.
Good catch, Isabella. Using conjunctions thoughtfully makes your sentences clearer and more professional.
Conjunctions are essential tools for creating well-connected, fluid sentences. Up next, we'll talk about the final part of speech, interjections. Patrick, ready to shout this one out?
Absolutely. Let's bring some emotion into our sentences with interjections.
We've made it to the final part of speech, interjections. These are the words or phrases that express sudden emotions, reactions, or feelings. They're like the spice of language, adding excitement, surprise, or emphasis to your sentences.
Exactly, Isabella. Interjections can stand alone as complete expressions or be part of a larger sentence. They're often followed by an exclamation mark, but not always. Let's dive into some examples.
Here are some commonly used interjections and what they convey. Wow, used to express amazement or surprise. Wow, this cake is delicious. Oh, indicates realization or surprise. Oh, I forgot my keys. Oops, used when a mistake is made. Oops, I spilled the milk. Yay, expresses joy or excitement. Yay, we won the game. Uh-oh, indicates concern or that something bad has happened. Uh-oh, I think I lost my wallet.
Notice how these words add color and emotion to the sentence. They're short, impactful, and often capture the speaker's immediate reaction. Interjections are super versatile. You'll hear them in casual conversations, stories, and even movies. For example, oh no when something goes wrong. Phew when you're relieved. Yikes when you're startled or worried.
They also help make your speech sound more natural and relatable. For instance, instead of just saying, that's interesting, you can say, wow, that's so interesting. See how it adds a layer of enthusiasm? One thing to keep in mind, interjections are usually informal. While they're great for conversations, storytelling, and social media, you'll want to avoid them in formal writing, like academic papers or professional emails.
Right, instead of saying, oops, I forgot to attach the file. In a work email, you might say, I apologize, I forgot to attach the file. Same idea, but more professional.
Let's do a quick practice round. Fill in the blanks with a fitting interjection. Or, I can't believe you finished the marathon. That's a huge spider. I think I left my phone at the cafe.
Possible answers are, wow, yikes, oh no, how did you do?
One common mistake is overusing interjections. If every sentence starts with wow or oh no, it can feel overwhelming. Use them sparingly to keep your speech or writing impactful.
Also, remember the context. Interjections that work in casual settings might feel out of place in more serious conversations.
And that's a wrap on interjections. These words may be small, but they pack a powerful punch in expressing emotions.
Absolutely, Isabella. Whether you're showing excitement, surprise, or concern, interjections help bring your words to life.
We've covered all 8 parts of speech in today's episode. Let's head into our outro to recap and share some final tips. Wow, Patrick, what a journey! We've officially covered all 8 parts of speech in this episode. Nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections.
Absolutely, Isabella. Understanding these building blocks of grammar is essential for mastering English. And we hope this episode helped you feel more confident in recognizing and using them.
Let's quickly recap what we've learned today. Nouns and pronouns help us identify people, places, things, and ideas. Verbs bring action or states of being to our sentences. Adjectives and adverbs add color by describing nouns and verbs. Prepositions and conjunctions are the glue that connects our ideas. And finally, interjections let us express emotions and reactions with flair.
Whether you're building sentences, writing essays, or simply chatting with friends, these parts of speech are your ultimate toolkit for effective communication.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into grammar, be sure to like this episode and subscribe to our channel. We're just getting started with our new grammar series.
That's right. Next time, we'll zoom in on nouns and explore them in greater detail. Types, functions, and how to use them effectively. You won't want to miss it.
And we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts, questions, or even your favorite examples of these parts of speech in the comments. Let's keep the conversation going on social media using #LearnEnglish, #GrammarSeries, English tips.
Thank you for joining us today. Remember, improving your grammar is a journey, and every step brings you closer to fluency. Keep practicing and stay curious.
Until next time, take care and keep learning. Bye for now.
See you in the next episode.